Hello, my name is Nicole, and thank you so much for taking the time out to listen. Today, I want to address something that a viewer or listener had mentioned about when a father has children and some of the things that go on when it comes to parenting those children, communicating with the children, as well as having a relationship or lack thereof with the mother. Some of these children grow up with the father more so than with the mother. And so there are a number of things that happen with some of these fathers, good, bad, and otherwise. We're going to talk about, though, the things that emotionally bind children in situations where mom is not as proactive as she could be had the father and the mother stayed together. One of the things that I came across years ago was a situation where a girl who was only in, I would say, the fourth grade at the time, actually fifth grade. She was in the fifth grade. She was about 10 years old and I was 10, and she started talking to me about living with her father. And I was shocked at the time because I hadn't known any fathers or knew of any children who were being raised by their father. And one day she showed up and she was talking about how her hair was hurting her head because her father did not know how to put the ties that were in her hair correctly, and so it was causing some pain. Then there was another time where she talked about some clothes that he had picked out and she didn't really like them, and then she was talking about her mother and how she missed her mom and she wanted to see her. And there was a lot of little things that she would say every now and again about living with her father. And then, of course, she was sometimes worried about him disciplining her over her grades. And sometimes she talked about things that went on between her brother and her as far as sibling issues. And so she was concerned about getting whipped on over whatever her brother and her were getting into. So she shared these things. Later on in life, I seen her as a young adult, and she seemed to be well adjusted. She seemed like she was moving on with her life quite well. We talked briefly and that was it. I did hear of some stories over the years that were quite disturbing concerning some fathers, and this is something that some fathers have to protect themselves against, because not every father is doing something awful to a daughter or a son. But there are those who do some things that are inappropriate. And there was one father who he was accused by the wife of saying as well as doing some inappropriate things with his children. And he swore up and down that he had never done anything to him. But she ended up getting the court involved, and the whole situation turned out to be quite nasty. There were adults arguing. There was some backlash as a result of her going to the authorities from his side of the family. It just got really ugly. But there was something about his demeanor, something that just made me feel like there was more to the story than what he was letting on. And for her to get to a place to have to say something that he said was a lie revealed that he had been abusive to her. And whether he did something inappropriate or not, the point was she was looking to get away from him. So a lot of what he was saying pointed to her being an abused woman who was pretty much trying to run for her life. Not necessarily doing it in an honest way, but either way, this was something that he didn't want to admit to totally. There was always a reason as to why he had to put his hands on her. So the father didn't get the opportunity to raise his children, but he did get to see them during supervised visits with the mutual party. So you've had an opportunity to listen to two situations, but what makes these situations binding? Things can get out of hand when you got other people involved who don't want you with your children. Things can get out of hand if one has acted in ways that pretty much made people say, I've got to protect my children. But there is something that goes on with some fathers that we will attribute to women very quickly. Mothers, stepmothers, adopted mothers, foster mothers, spiritual mothers. But there are fathers who do something very similar to some of these controlling mothers, and that is triangulation. And this happens when children are getting older and then eventually become adult sons and daughters. What they will do is carry information about a son or about a daughter to the sibling. And it may be something that is small, like your sister said to tell you hello, or the other day your sister and I, we were talking with one another about. And it could be something totally harmless, but then when parents get a little bit petty, they may say some things that are quite negative. And these fathers are not immune to this sort of thing, especially if they have some hidden agendas. So he may say something like, oh, your brother, he's good for telling some lies. I mean, let me tell you, the other day, and then turn right around and talk to his daughter and say, you know, you can't believe, or talk to the brother about the daughter and say, you know, you can't believe your sister's full of you know what, okay? And this sort of thing goes around and around. And so the siblings eventually have issue with each other. They may say something about what the father said, or they may not, okay? As I've said, there are those mothers who do this sort of thing, and I get into it and tell me, Mother, you're sorry. I don't get into it in full detail and say goodbye to Dad, but I do address some of the petty stuff that goes on with these fathers. So there's this wedge that is being built between siblings, and the father is playing like he is a peacemaker. He's playing like he has everything together emotionally, physically, and spiritually, and that the children need to learn from him because, well, of course, I know more than you. I've been on the planet longer than you, and all of this other stuff that some of these wicked men come up with. Now, I'm going to move into some information once again, just to enlighten some of you all. There are those men that are quick to talk about what the mothers and what all these other females, aunts, cousins, you name it, what they do that is petty, and women, and they're so gossipy, and they're this and that, always having something negative to say about women. And when a male is around a man like this, he tends to treat women in the way that he sees his father or hears his father talk about women. So his respect level isn't very high when it comes to women, but it's up there when it comes to dealing with the same sex. And sometimes this can be misconstrued as being gay, or this one is bisexual, and because there's a favor that goes on with the same sex. I talk about men who hate women If you want to learn more about some of the stuff that goes on with some of these men, by all means, check out that audio. The Lord had moved on me to talk about that. So imagine a man having this sort of thing going on, and he's left to raise children. And he doesn't quite see where he's in the wrong. He doesn't see where negative influences have impacted him, whether from the mother, the father, or both. He refuses to admit that he may be a part of triangulation when it comes to siblings. He rather believe that the father is good and righteous and wonderful and true. Or he may even say, well, my dad has some hang-ups, but that's still my dad. But he's not recognizing that his dad's behavior is affecting him and possibly the children who he is raising. And sometimes what happens is that these controlling individuals, these men who want very much to be a part of their sons' lives, they will act very pushy about what they expect from them. So he may be pushy about money. He may remind his son, look, I have done this, that, and the other for you. You owe me. He may even badmouth his son to other people because he is not stepping up to the plate in the way that he thinks he should. He may also say the types of things that he hopes doesn't get back to him, or he hopes that they do. Words like he's strange, he's weird, he's gay, he's very derogatory types of words that he may throw in the mix. And people will say, well, why are you talking? Those that are discerning will say, well, why are you talking about your son? Just giving an example, because I've heard some pretty negative things that fathers have said about their children when I was much younger, as well as when I got involved in different relationships. And so you may question, why would you say that about your son, or what is it that he did or didn't do? And then it usually goes back to some things where the father expected the son to step up to the plate and do some things for him, and he dropped the ball and he is still holding some grudges. Okay. Sometimes children can act very much like that woman that the man doesn't like, that mother, if you will, the one he can't get along with. And so he's got a lot of negative things to say about that son acting just like the mother. When these sorts of things take place, the Lord will show us that that is a person that we should not trust. Some of you all might date someone who has children and who tends to do this sort of thing with their own sons and daughters. And the sons and daughters could be older or they could be younger. But you see some shady stuff going on, some negative things being said. And then the person may end up being very mean-spirited toward you because you are pointing out the truth about this triangulation that might be going on between the father and his children. You might be that one that brings up some issues about that son being so subservient, maybe even nervous or fearful of the father. There may be some things that you question the father doing with the children if they're much younger. And he starts to go off, or he starts to nitpick, or he starts to fault find, or he wants to change the subject, or don't talk to me about this. Okay. Sometimes these men might act quite violent. You got a lot of nerve coming over here telling me something. Say something else and see if I don't hurt you, or I don't do this or that or the other, which I've come across that type of individual as well. A lot of times what will happen is that if you are that one that sees a lot going on with father and sons and daughters, or that father may not be there, he may run around saying that he's helping this child and that one, but he's really not. Or he may say that he's helping grandchildren, but his idea of help is not anything to talk about. So you point these sorts of things out, or you see them, and so now you are considered an enemy because you're not going along with programming. And so there is this brainwashing that takes place with some of these individuals who they want they are brainwashed, and so they want to brainwash you into believing that people are better than what they appear to be. If the mother was shoving daddy down people's throat, so to speak, talking about how wonderful your father is, you should respect him, he loves you, he's there for you, he's this, that, and the other, then that negative attitude that you might have had, or started seeing the true colors of the father, you listen to the mother's brainwashing, and so you're not able to see things for what they really are. But when death takes place, truth starts to show up. When serious illness takes place, you start to think about all of the times daddy was there or daddy wasn't there. You start to think about those moments where you wanted some things and you didn't get them. And so you had to ask mom, you had to ask sister, brother, people at the school, the teachers, because dad was more concerned about getting his selfish needs met. And this is what some people go through in this network, are the types of things that keep them emotionally bound, because they're still dealing with folks who are doing this sort of thing to them. Stuff that happened way back when they were children, they get an updated version of it once they become adults. The father-son, father-daughter relationship begins to unravel as more and more things come to the surface. And the one who God may be using or may not be using, but there's some truth that shows up, ends up getting the brunt of a lot of what that person's going through, because folks don't want to break programming. They don't want to see beyond the natural. They don't want to hear any type of criticism about their family members, especially, once again, if they have been brainwashed. And this programming comes around year after year, especially around holiday seasons. So you thought that everything was in its proper perspective if you are the messenger, and the person recognizes the truth for what it is, only for them to go back into programming and look at you as the bad guy. Because, of course, that father, if he suspects that there is a connectedness, truth is coming out, some things that he may have said are starting to surface, he's got to lie. He's got to exaggerate. He's got to say things like, oh, I think you're misunderstood, or your wife or your husband's misunderstood. That's not what I meant. That's not what I said. God sees all of these sorts of things. And as much as it can be quite frustrating addressing issues, understand that God knows, okay? And you are there to support someone who might be going through some things. But then if the person ends up mistreating you or disrespecting you or acting very evilly because they don't want to face truth, then God will set it up so that there is distance. And when there's distance, there's usually a fallout at some point where there may be some confrontation, but then maybe not. It may be peaceful. It might be just one of those separations, breakups, distance from the family that's doing all of this without too much of anything. So for those of you all who questioned some things when it comes to the father-daughter, father-son relationship, and how some of this foolishness that these fathers do tends to keep some people bound, you are not alone in this sort of thing. And what I suggest that you do is, number one, distance yourself from anyone or anything that is causing upset for you as well as the younger members of your family. They shouldn't have to go through listening to the lies and the cover-ups and the secrets and even the exaggerations dealing with this controlling father or lazy father or temperamental father or just plain old strange father. I don't care if it's a stepfather, an adopted father, a foster father, a spiritual father, or a biological father. When God shows us the truth, we are responsible for that truth, and we are also responsible for protecting those individuals who cannot help themselves. Okay? We have way too many people out here that's abusing people emotionally and physically, and they get away with it because people co-sign on it. They say, well, dad didn't hurt mom, or it wasn't that bad. And I did have a relative who said something like that to me. Oh, it was nothing more than a tussle. A tussle, okay? The story was that the mother was abused by the father. Oh, please. That's those other people saying that. And I was shocked because I said, why is it that 4 people know that the woman was abused, but yet this individual refuses to see the truth? So needless to say, that relative, I distanced myself from her because I did not want to listen to this hyping up of this deceased father. I mean, he was deceased. She could have come out and just spoke the truth, and she still refused to speak the truth. So for those of you all, please do check out Say Goodbye to Dad, just in time for Father's Day. I know that Father's Day is not a good time for everyone. There are those that have been fathers back when folks were young, and hats off to them. But then as time went on, they relinquished their roles and went on about their business. There have been those fathers that have been there every step of the way. That means they communicated. That means that they are active in their children's lives. That means that they are active in their grandchildren's lives, and they're quite positive, and they show love, they show appreciation. And then, of course, there are those who could care less and will badmouth children as well as grandchildren at every chance they get. So when these different people are out here, we have to be mindful not to say the types of things to individuals that make it seem as if everybody is having this wonderful Father's Day and everybody feels good. Some people are grieving, okay? They recently lost fathers. I talked with one a while back who had lost her father. She was not in the best spirits. Sometimes people will snap on you because they are just going through a lot. I had talked with a woman who now is deceased, but when she spoke of her father, she had a lot of positive things to say, but she also had a lot of negative things to say. She was not one of those delusional daughters. And she made a lot of decisions based on what she thought was right for her, but there were negative influences that had come from her father. So as much as people don't want to be held accountable and they don't want to be blamed for their role or lack thereof, the truth is that as parents, we are held accountable, and God will talk with us about these sorts of things. If we seek Him, if we want to come up higher, He will use other people to talk to us about things, whether we like them or not. And then, of course, we will see our Maker, and we will be judged accordingly. So when you're a parent, we can make excuses all we want for all sorts of things, but when God says that we are in the wrong about something, we're in the wrong. So there are many fathers, unfortunately, who were in the wrong about many things. And so God will allow certain things to happen. Sometimes you're going to hear or you will experience someone struggle dealing with a father or father figure. And when this sort of thing happens, as believers, we pray. And if the person is willing to listen to counsel, then, of course, we give counsel. Well, that is it. I thank you, as always, for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen. You've been listening to YouTube NM Enterprise 7. To God be the glory. Please do check the description box for anything that might be of interest. Blessings to you.